It's the Brad Field Weather Podcast, underwritten by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a full-service family-run flooring company, and by McAllen Construction Company, a woman-owned small minority business. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. I am Dan Lovallo. He is meteorologist Brad Field. And Brad, here we are, putting this podcast together on December 30th, our last podcast of 2020. How about that?
Well, anything that's the last of 2020 is fine with me. I hope everybody had a great Christmas, Dan, and made it as nice as they could possibly make it. And I, for one, and I know there are thousands out there also, that are just so anxious to turn that calendar to 2021 and hope for a much brighter year for the citizens of Connecticut and the United States, and the world for that matter.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, before we get into the crux of the weather and what's going on, we are now into our third year of this podcast. Do you realize that?
No, I didn't. Actually, I didn't, Dan. And I know you've kept track of how many podcasts we've done, but we've done, I don't think we've missed a week. I don't think we've missed a week, and that's kind of hard for us to do with various family commitments and vacationing and so forth. But it's been a privilege to work with you on this, Dan, and it's kind of a labor of love. It's, to be quite honest, not much labor because I do the forecast every day anyway. And it's something that you and I both love to do, and it's been in our bones for years. And, you're still out there broadcasting and, doing the sporting events and so forth. So this is great. This is very, very fun. And, hopefully some people are getting something out of it. And for me, it's so different than doing the typical 2-minute and 30-second report on the nightly news. This way you can delve into detail and explain why you're thinking what you're thinking. So it's a lot of fun. And we've got a lot of explaining to do in this particular podcast because a lot of things are going to be happening.
Yeah, we sure have a lot to talk about. Let me just say I echo your sentiments, and it really has been an honor for me doing this podcast with you as we now go into episode number 123. So that said, this weather map all of a sudden on December 30th looks pretty active. What's going on?
Yeah, we've got, first off, we've got a cold front that'll be coming through overnight tonight, and not much with it, a few showers. But, Dan, the temperatures are going to be borderline, so it'll be between 30 and 35. So, in places where a rain shower occurs and the temperature's 30, obviously you could get some icy spots. And where a rain shower occurs and the temperature, say, 34, all it's going to do is just wet the pavement. So we've got a little thing coming through tonight in the form of a cold front. Now, New Year's Eve day, for the most part, is going to be fine. Cooling temperatures, it's going to be between 38 and 44, but tend to cool as the day goes on. And then by the time we get to New Year's Day, we're going to have a storm cut to our west. Now, normally when a storm cuts to the west, ultimately it turns to rain. This time, I think there'll be enough cold air around at the start of the storm, which would be late on New Year's Day, so let be late Friday afternoon or Friday night. We're going to see snow, sleet, freezing rain break out, especially across the northern third of Connecticut. Southern Connecticut may end up with mostly rain out of this thing. And then on Saturday, we've got a pretty dry day. But then Sunday, it's a little more interesting, Dan. We've got another storm coming, and this storm may take a snowier route. So when folks are going back to work and school Monday morning, January 4th, we may be dealing with some snow on the ground again, especially in the northern third of Connecticut.
So what's at play here on the weather map, which is making the atmospheric seem more active?
Well, things are moving, really moving. We've always talked about how in the summer you can get a stagnant pattern where, it's sunny day after day after day for a couple of weeks or something with no real change in the overall weather pattern. And that's because the jet is far to the north. It's way up in northern central Canada. But now the jet is active across the lower 48, and we've got things breezing along. So what we're looking at today is high pressure moving offshore. And the reason it's going to be cloudy today is we've got a moist southwesterly flow that's also developing in front of the cold front, which is approaching from the Great Lakes area. But I don't expect any precipitation during the day today. Now, overnight, it looks like that front will be coming through. The cold front will be crossing New England tomorrow morning. High pressure out near Chicago will be ridging to the east. So we're looking for improving weather during the day on Thursday, which is New Year's Eve day. A strong low is going to be forming in the western Gulf of Mexico. Now, by daybreak Friday, it'll be Happy New Year 2021. But on daybreak Friday, we'll have high pressure near Albany, a low in northwestern Arkansas that's going to have a swath of ice and snow from northern Oklahoma to Kansas, parts of northern Missouri, Iowa. It looks like northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, southern Michigan. So that area of precipitation will be moving toward us. The key on Friday is that high near Albany. That could drain down enough cold air so that when the precipitation starts here on Friday night, it would be in that mixed and icy form, the snow, the sleet, the freezing rain, and the rain across the state. And you know where you live and what typically happens. If you're in Stonington, you know it'll end up probably be mostly rain. And if you live in Norfolk, you know it'll end up being mostly ice and snow. So that's the situation on Friday night. Now, by daybreak Saturday, that low is going to be near Buffalo. So whenever a storm cuts to the west, we ultimately go mild. Even if we don't go mild at the surface, say it stays cold at the surface, that enhances the threat of icing because it does warm at cloud level. So with the storm out near Buffalo, remember, it's counterclockwise around a low. So with a storm out near Buffalo, we've got a mean flow in the atmosphere from the southwest. We will have a warm front right around Connecticut daybreak Saturday. We will have the cold front catching up. We call that the triple point, where they all come together. The warm front, the cold front, the occluded front, and that's going to be happening right over Connecticut, I think, daybreak Saturday. Now, by Sunday, we've got high pressure on the Vermont-Canada border. And again, that's a good position for a high. That's a good position for someone who likes snow or wintry weather because you've got a cold air source. And that will be at the Vermont-Canada border daybreak Sunday. Meanwhile, there will be low pressure off the coast of Norfolk, Virginia. Now, you look at that and say, I mean, if that storm comes up with a cold high to the north, it's going to be in the form of snow. We've got a little bit of a model discrepancy here that I'll get into in just a minute. For example, the GFS takes this thing out to sea, south of us, but the European computer model brings it a lot closer. And if you like snow, you're cheering for the European model. Now, daybreak Monday, that low is in the western Atlantic, close enough to give a little bit of an icy mix and snow to parts of Connecticut. And we're going to highlight this system because after the week of the holiday and everything, a lot of folks going back to work and school on Monday morning, January 4th, and it looks like we could have a little bit of a problem there. By daybreak Tuesday, the system Monday has cleared out. High pressure from Alabama and Georgia, ridging up into Connecticut. It looks good, and incidentally, Dan, I just thought of this sort of standing here when I mentioned the high on the Alabama-Georgia border. That's the day for the election in Georgia, and it looks like the election will be unimpeded. I think with high pressure in control, it looks like there'll be good weather. So I know the fear was that if there was an ice storm or whatever, you get even a little snow flurry in northern Georgia, it shuts down the state. So it looks like none of that will be happening. So I guess good news there. But so we've got three things on the map, Dan. The cold front tonight. Then on Friday night, the storm ultimately cutting to our west, the kind of mixed bag. And then on Sunday night and Monday morning, we have that kind of model discrepancy. All right, is the storm going to come close enough to give us wintry precipitation? The GFS says mainly no. The European says mainly yes.
I want to talk a bit about Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, underwriters of the Brad Field Weather Podcast, and we are so appreciative that Action Carpet and Floor Covering underwrites our podcast. Action Carpet and Floor Covering is a full-service, licensed, family-run flooring company serving the region. In fact, it was founded in 1993 by Kevin Blake. Something you need to know, Action Carpet and Floor Covering serves both residential and commercial customers, offering brand-name floor covering products in vinyl, laminate, hardwood, carpet, area rugs, and tile, plus backsplash. Action Carpet and Floor Covering installs, plus offers professional cleaning services, and will repair water damage. And Action Carpet and Floor Covering does much, much more. In fact, they want their customers to be so satisfied that they want to be considered the go-to company. They want their customers to consider them as the one and only floor covering company. Call Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury today at 860-651-8406. That's 860-651-8406. Or go online at action-carpet.com. That's action-carpet.com. Action Carpet and Floor Covering, a full-service flooring company. Brad, what is it about these two models that always seem to be at loggerheads? It's rare that the GFS and European are on the same page, and as it turns out, the European usually seems to be more accurate. What is it about these two models?
Well, the thing is, Dan, there are different equations and different algorithms in all of the models. We have so many models now. We've got the high-resolution rapid refresh model. We've got the North American model. We've got the global forecast system model, the GFS. We've got the European model. We've got the Canadian model. I mean, we've got all these different models. And you talk about initial data. Whenever you're doing any kind of computer programming at all, there used to be the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. You've got to be so specific with your readings because you are taking these readings in an instant in time, and we're not just talking about what's happening, say, in Hartford or, say, in Boston or in Burlington, Vermont. We're talking what's happening 1 mile above Boston and Hartford and Burlington, Vermont. What is happening 5 miles above Burlington and Boston and Hartford? We're looking at the atmosphere in 3 dimensions, and as I said, you got garbage in, you'll get garbage out, and when you project it over time, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, 96 hours, 120 hours, as you project out through time, the error, if there are errors that are input, will get worse. So a lot of times what you're looking for is not one particular model run, but kind of a series of model runs in what is the model trying to tell you in general. And one thing that I go by a lot is, another one of these sayings that we have in the weather office. The trend is our friend. So if we're watching a storm that it looks like it's going to go out to sea and miss us, say, 250 miles south and east of Nantucket, and then 12 hours later, the next run comes in, and the storm now is only 200 miles south and east of Nantucket. And then we let another 12 hours go by, and another computer model run comes out, and the storm is now only 150 miles south and east of Nantucket. You can see it's trending closer and closer and closer to the New England shoreline. So I would use that as a trend and say, it looks like this storm is going to hit, because the trend is our friend, and the trend showed it initially missing, but every subsequent run coming closer and closer and closer. So the different models all use different input, different algorithms, and some are good at some things. And for example, the high-resolution rapid refresh model does the precipitation to the hour for a specific location. So, it would have, for example, Bradley today at 8 a.m., how much rain falls between 7 and 8, how much rain falls between 8 and 9 a.m., how much rain falls between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. It's very specific and very short-fused, short range. The North American model, the NAM, I think does very well with cold air damming. And what do I mean by that? There are a lot of times that if you look at different parameters in our atmosphere, like what the temperature is at cloud level and what is the, quote, thickness of the atmosphere, which is something meteorologically that we use, there are a lot of times that the models do not account for cold air damming near ground surfaces, especially if there's a big snow cover in our area and points north of here. So the North American model does very well with cold air damming. I remember there was a time that Channel 3 had a meteorologist that they hired from Northern California, I believe. His name was Miles Musio, and he was inexperienced with New England weather. And he used the thickness parameters, and he used the cloud level temperature and everything. And he had readings the next day in the 50s with rain. And I had it jammed 28 degrees with freezing rain at Bradley. And I was right. I'm not just recounting this story because I was right, but I've learned to use different models differently. The North American model knew that even though it would be warm up at cloud level, the cold air would be jammed in near the surface, and that's the most treacherous of any weather phenomenon. You get a raindrop coming down through the atmosphere, and if it encounters a thickness large enough that of cold air that the raindrop has time to freeze, it becomes an ice pellet. But if it encounters a cold air with a thickness not thick enough that it doesn't have time to freeze before it hits the ground, it becomes a supercooled water droplet, and it freezes on contact to power lines, to your windshield, to tree limbs. That's the most treacherous of all for walking and traveling and so forth. That, of course, is freezing rain. So, it's the different models have different strengths and weaknesses, but the thing you got to always remember about weather, it's not only north, south, east, west. There's a lot of calculus in weather and what you call DZ. That means how things change with height. And DT, which means how things change over time. So with meteorology, it's north, south, east, west, up and down over time.
So what you're also saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the meteorologist has all of this information at his or her disposal, but then you take all of this information, you distill it, and you have to rely on your own educated instincts to make the call on the forecast. Is that correct?
That is perfect. I couldn't have said it better. That is perfect, Dan. Yes. And believe me, all the modeling is new. I graduated in 1978, and that was the first year we had any kind of computer model. It was called the LFM, Linear Fine Mesh is what that stood for. It's grid pattern. And the LFM was the first computer model we ever had. Other than that, before that, we had two radius-on balloons that went up at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening over Albany, New York, and over Chatham, Massachusetts. And if there was the rain-snow line was somewhere between Albany, New York, and Chatham, Massachusetts, in other words, where the temperature was below 32 at cloud level, we would have to guess where that rain-snow line was going to set up. Because there was no way to tell. So things have come so far, so fast in meteorology, Dan, that it's a constant learning experience. But the whole thing is, you said it perfectly. You all have the same information. Channel 3 has the same information. Channel 30 has the same information as Channel 8 and Fox 61. Everybody has the same information. It's how the individual meteorologist interprets all of this information, and it's how the individual meteorologist has experience in the region, and also it goes to his or her abilities as well. So it's kind of like being a baseball player. I mean, somebody can try as hard as they can and only hit 200, and then some other person can roll out of bed and hit 300. So it's like different people have different aptitudes too. So you gotta pick a meteorologist you trust and watch him or her over time.
Well, Brad and I are so excited to welcome back as one of our underwriters to the Bradfield Weather Podcast, McAllen Construction of Prospect, Connecticut, a full-service construction company servicing the entire state for over 25 years, engaging in residential and commercial building projects. Also, McAllen Construction handles snow removal. And we are getting some snow, that's for sure. McAllen Construction is on call 24/7, 365 days a year. Utility construction, site work, water and sewer repairs, and installation. Something else you need to know about McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction is a woman-owned small minority business licensed with the state of Connecticut and insured. Licensed as a major contractor, new home construction contractor, plumbing and piping limited P7, home improvement contractor and subsurface sewage installer, utility, carpentry, excavation, and snow removal for residents, commercial businesses, and state and local governments. Call McAllen Construction today, 203-758-3474, or go online, McAllenConstructionCT.com. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. Brad, before we look ahead, let's look back. Again, we're putting this podcast together on December the 30th, so I know you have some numbers on the month of December. What did they look like?
Yeah, Dan, we're saying kiss the summer drought of 2020 goodbye. I mean, we've been making strong inroads over the last several months, and no difference during December. 5.14 inches of melted precipitation, and 3.24 is normal. So we had nearly a 2-inch surplus in precipitation during this month of December. Snowfall, Dan, 13.3 inches for the month of December, which is a 6.6-inch surplus. And for the season to date, it's 15.3. Remember, we had that couple inches of snow right before Halloween. So for the season to date, 15.3 inches of snow.
Wow. And that's the perfect segue for our crystal ball segment, because the map is setting up to look very interesting. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we look at the different parameters globally, and we've discussed this before on many of our previous podcasts. You know, what is the ENSO state, the El Nino Southern Oscillation State? That's what ENSO stands for. Is it a La Nina? Is it an El Nino? Or is it normal, neutral, ENSO neutral? Some people call it La Nada. The fact of the matter is, Dan, when you have something happening somewhere, it induces something to happen somewhere else. And we found through experience that when it's La Nina or trending ENSO neutral, we can end up with some fairly snowy winters or situations where it looks good for snow. Now, I've been studying this fairly closely lately, and I've been looking at something else that meteorology buffs will have heard of. It's called the North Atlantic Oscillation, and or the NAO. And when that goes negative, and it's forecast to go quite negative for the first few weeks of January, that is the famous Greenland blocking. That means that when storms come along, all right, so if there's ridging out near Greenland, okay, high pressure and ridging out near Greenland, that would induce a downstream trough. So that trough would be like through the Great Lakes and over New England. Well, that troughing allows cold air to slide down into the Great Lakes and New England area from eastern Canada. So that's one thing that troughing does. But also the troughing will induce storms to come up the coast from North Carolina on their way to Nova Scotia, which is a perfect pattern for us to get snow in. And then the third factor is when you've got the blocking out there over Greenland, you stop the storm, you slow the storm down. So in other words, if we're looking at a storm moving along without a block, it will come up the coast, maybe give us 6 to 8 hours of snow, and exit. And if you're getting snow at the rate of a half an inch to maybe an inch an hour for 6 to 8 hours, you might end up with 3 to 6 inches of snow. Now, what happens when you have the Greenland block? You've got Arctic air draining down to work with coming out of eastern Canada. Then you've got a storm track that's very favorable because the colder air will suppress the storm track to our south and east, which gives us a rising chance for snow. And then the Greenland block will slow it down. So in other words, instead of getting 6 to 8 hours of snow, now you might be looking at 24 to 36 hours of snow from a storm. And you still come up with a half an inch to an inch an hour. You know, you could be talking blockbuster. You could be talking a foot and a half of snow accumulation. So it looks like these pieces may be coming together, Dan. And if I had to bet on it right now, I'd say maybe after the first week of January, somewhere around the 8th, 9th, 10th, I would be on the lookout for some pretty good East Coast storms. And we could also start entraining some cold air down from eastern Canada. We could also be putting down some pretty good snow with staying power. So what I mean by that is, not these quick changes in temperature so that the 15 inches of snow we had the week before Christmas melts away. That was just incredible to watch that. You go to bed Christmas Eve with 10 inches of snow on the ground, and you wake up Christmas morning with only a few piles. That's what I see down the road. The increasingly negative North Atlantic Oscillation, which means more blocking, and the weak La Nina. Now, I went back and looked, Dan, at the La Nina ENSO figures, and guess what they match up mostly with? The winter of 2010-2011. The numbers, the actual number assigned to the intensity of the La Nina pattern and the ENSO neutral pattern in the Pacific, very similar to what happened in 2010, 2011 is forecast to happen for the rest of this winter. That winter was a big one. We had 86.4 inches at Bradley. We've had worse winters. For the winter of 95, 96, we had about 120 inches of snow at Bradley. But, this 86.4 inches is nothing to sneeze at. And if I had to guess now, I would say the odds of us having above normal snowfall this winter are high.
Well, this all shapes up to be a very interesting month of January into February then, to say the least. But that said, we want to remind our audience of the fact that we could be facing a more immediate storm on Sunday into Monday. And if the situation changes, we will do a brief special podcast on Sunday, won't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. If this thing shakes out a little bit more than what we're thinking. And right now, Dan, the European model, which I like a lot, has the storm Sunday morning in the Virginia-North Carolina border with a cold high up near Dixville Notch, New Hampshire. Sunday evening, the European has the low around Atlantic City, New Jersey. Monday morning, the European has the low south of the eastern tip of Long Island. And by Monday evening, the European has the low about 50 to 100 miles east of Boston. And in their snowfall prediction, they have less than 1 inch for the southern half of Connecticut. So kind of a rainy, maybe a little slush in the southern half of Connecticut. They have 1 to 3 inches of snow for most of northern Connecticut. And again, this would be when you wake up Monday morning. But from Heartland west through Goshen and Colebrook and Norfolk, we could see 3 to 6 inches of snow, possibly more. And it builds up quickly to around a foot of snow in the Berkshires. So there's room for error here, Dan, and room for things to change. So if we do see some changes and more significant snow across Connecticut coming Sunday night, Monday, yes, of course, we'll update and do a storm-specific forecast sometime on Sunday morning.
Don't tell me that Dixville Notch is going to be the bellwether for this forecast.
Yeah, they're the political bellwether, and that's a perfect place. I got to tell you, I've never visited Dixville Notch, but it's the perfect place for a high pressure to be with a storm coming. It's sitting right there on the New Hampshire-Canada border, and it's a perfect place for cold air to be entrained into a system coming up the coast.
Well, that said, before we wrap up our podcast, what does, and again we're putting this together on Wednesday, December 30th, what does our immediate forecast look like?
Well, for this afternoon, Dan, it looks like it'll be mostly cloudy. Temperatures in the 30s. Now, tonight with a cold front coming across, a period of light rain or light freezing rain. Temperatures 30 to 35 overnight. And again, if it's 31 at your house, you're going to have some slick spots in the morning. But if it stays 34 in your town overnight tonight, it's just going to be wet. For the last day of 2020, it'll be mostly cloudy. Gloomy, kind of like the year was. Temperature between 40 and 45. Overnight, New Year's Eve, it will be partly cloudy with temperatures 20 to 25. So chilly, but not too cold. Friday looks like a mostly sunny day to ring in the new year. Temperature between 36 and 42. Now remember, Friday night and Saturday morning, we've got a storm cutting to our west, but we initially have cold air in place. So overnight snow and ice, and we'll say the northern third of Connecticut. I'd say Hartford points north and west, and Hartford points north and east should get some snow and ice on Friday night. Hartford south should be mainly rain. Saturday, rain in southern Connecticut, mix in northern Connecticut, ending early. I'd say by mid-morning it'll be all gone. Partly sunny, 38 to 44. Sunday, The rising chance for a mix in northern Connecticut as we head towards sunset, rain in southern Connecticut, and then that interesting Sunday night, Monday morning period where it looks like some snow or mixed precipitation. Monday looks like a mix of sun and clouds, breezy as the storm departs, temperature probably around 40, and Tuesday looks mostly sunny and a temperature around 40. And I know the winter weather fans, Dan, don't want to hear the high temperature around 40, but we do have a way to go. We've got about, as I said, about that first week of January, it's going to be kind of like slightly above normal, mid-30s. It should be 36 on a daily basis now. I'm saying like 38 to 44 for the high, so several degrees above average for a while. But things are changing, and once the atmospheric geometry sets up with that block over Greenland and inducing the troughing over us, things will start to change.
All right. On that note, to you and Sandy and your family and our podcast audience, a Happy New Year. A reminder, we may do a special podcast on Sunday, depending on how that storm turns out, the storm track, and also to our first responders. What a year they've had, 2020. May 2021 be better for everybody, especially for our first responders, because as you know, Brad, they are the real heroes.
They're the heroes of the year. I saw, Time Magazine voted for their, man and woman of the year, and it was President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. But I agree with you, Dan. I think the heroes of the year are those first responders.
No question. All right, friends, and again, we may have that special podcast for you on Sunday. The Bradfield Weather Podcast has been underwritten by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a full-service, family-run flooring company, and by McAllen Construction Company, a woman-owned, small minority business. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail.